Holden, my friend, how are we doing today?
Doing well, Michael. Good to see you.
It's good to be seen, Holden. It's good to be seen. So today is Wednesday, November 3rd, and we are talking about the new MacBook Pro, the new M1 Pro and M1X. What a horrible naming scheme. I think we'll just start there. I mean, I think they really have it in for people like you and me who talk about these products every day, and it's just kind of like a word jumble of trying to get it out. M1 Max Pro, M1 Pro Max. MacBook Pro Max.
Yeah, it's a total mouthful.
It's a total mouthful.
Here's the question too: where do they go from here? What are they going to do for the Mac Pro? Not the iMac Pro, the Mac Pro, because they've already said Max. What's bigger than Max? They can do like M1 Infinite or Infinity or something like that, or M1 Beyond. Like where do they go from here?
Extreme.
That'd be kind of close to Intel though, because I think they had the Extreme.
Yeah. I mean, it's really like it's a marketing thing now, because before, I don't know if they really talked about maybe so prominently the processors that were in the previous notebooks or even the previous computers. They would say, hey, this has the Intel whatever it was, Ryzen or whatever it's called. I'm making some name up like Ryzen Lake or Sky Lake or Ice Lake or whatever.
Oh yeah, those ones. I forgot about those ones. Yeah,
but
Coffee
or
Lake
the
was a weird one.
The Xenon. Right, that was the server grade processors that were in the Mac Pro, but now it's like that was not necessarily at the forefront, and now they are very much putting this at the forefront, so that it is at the top of consumers' minds. But unfortunately, it comes at the expense as that it's a total tongue twister, because you're like M1 Max, 16-inch MacBook Pro with M1 Max with M1 Max Pro. Like what do you do? It's kind of crazy.
Also, it makes it difficult too, because when they first announced it, my assumption was there are two chips, M1 Pro and M1 Max, but really there's three chips, M1 Pro, and then two variations of the M1 Max that are named the exact same thing.
I'm trying to process what you said there. So you are saying that there's the M1, which is the one that came out last year. There's the M1 Pro, which is a larger chip than that, and then there's the M1 Max, which is a larger chip than that. Yep, right. So far, we're on the same page.
Yes. Almost.
Okay.
There's those three chips, but the M1 Max is actually technically two different chips. There's a better GPU version or something like that.
Okay. Oh, wow.
It has more cores. There's like I think it's like 24 cores in the lower end M1 Max, and then 32 in the other one.
Yeah.
It's not the biggest deal in the world. I don't think I don't think Apple's doomed or anything. But it is a little strange. It's like, okay, you have three chips, but two product name SKUs, but you technically have three SKUs for the MacBook Pro style.
So what you are referring to, Holden, is that they are doing binning on a lot of on the new M1 chips. And do you know what binning is? Or I don't want to explain it if you do.
I haven't heard the term, but I'm going to make an assumption here. Is it like when they don't get a good enough yield on one chip, so they say, hey, okay, we're just going to have this 24-core version instead of a 32-core version? Kind of how there's like the 7-core M1 chip on the MacBook Air?
You are spot on correct. That was a great deduction that you came to there. So
Thank you.
that is exactly what it is. So they are doing binning on one set of silicon to get the 14-core CPU, GPU, and I think it's 7-core or maybe it's 8-core version. And then on the M1 Max, they're doing the same thing there, where instead of getting 16 cores, instead of getting 32 cores, they're doing 24 and 32, which is kind of crazy. So
that makes sense.
Presumably, that on these next round of chips, you'd see a 64-core chip on the high end, and then maybe like a 48 and a 54 maybe would be the kind of the allotment of the processors.
That's for the next MacBook Pro?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay,
maybe the M2, not on the ones that we have now. But let's
that
talk
would
about
make sense.
Yeah, let's not talk about the future. Let's talk about the present, because that's where it's at. At least that's what I tell my son. So the
present is a gift.
The present is a gift. So I would say maybe not unsurprisingly, maybe just to paint the picture. So we've had the M1 MacBook Pros for just about a year, and these came out in typical Apple fashion. They were like, this is the most powerful Mac we've ever made. Of course it is. You don't come out with last year's technology in a new computer. I would say, no joke, I'm using the M1 Max 32 core no, sorry, M1 Max, 32 gigs of RAM, and I didn't get the 64 because that was just like ridiculous. I'm like, who would ever need that much RAM? And I got the 1 terabyte version. I'm about 25 to 35% faster in my video editing workflows than I was previously, which is kind of insane. There's no heat or very little heat coming out of this for the most part during like normal workflows. It's almost like sipping on a glass or a cup of tea. Like if you were English and it was tea time, you're doing it with your finger in the air. That's how much energy consumption there is on this device. Like I was able to, this is a double-edged sword, I'll just tell you that right now. I was able to use it for like an hour and a half or maybe an hour and 45 minutes the other night, and it used like 4% of battery. Just kind of surfing the internet and doing other things.
Wow.
Yeah, it was insane. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. But then on the flip side of that, I was editing a video yesterday and I killed the battery in 3.5 hours. I'm like, oh my God, that's like, I didn't know what to expect. And, I had a drive plugged into my computer. So it was a bus power drive. So it was taking, energy off that or taking battery off that. So I was a little bit surprised, but still, it's much better in terms of performance than the M1 MacBook was. And it's much better in terms of battery life than the old Intel chips. So everyone who had an Intel chip, they had a 2016, 2017, 2019 MacBook Pro, the ones that were like stovetops, where they were basically just could fry an egg on them. They were so hot. They bought them like it's hotcakes because those people have been using old computers for a long time. Quite impressive. Keep trying to get the screen right.
Yeah, I haven't gotten a chance to see one in person yet. I've just been kind of seeing people's responses online and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But it really seems like almost like a perfect laptop. Like even the 3.5 hour battery life when you were editing video, I don't even think that's that bad. Because like, what scenarios are you going to be away from a outlet for 3.5 hours, but you're also going to be editing for 3.5 hours straight? Like yeah, I don't think that's going to happen often enough that like it's going to be a hindrance. It's also still better than the previous Macs, I imagine.
What you're saying is completely true, right? Like, when will I ever be in a position where I have to edit video for 3.5 hours, I'm not near a plug for 3.5 hours, and my battery would die? Which is, I think by itself, if you think about that, I'm editing 4K footage on my computer in 3.5 hours. Like this machine, it's kind of mind-blowing in the fact that this doesn't make me a better editor, but it makes me editing move much quicker because like the moving between not just the files that are, the clips that I'm using, but also the effects and color grading. This thing is insane. I'm like, oh my God, I couldn't believe how fast it was when I was putting like adjustment layers, which are like kind of like filters more or less on my clips. It was just like applying the color, applying the, the transition, applying the effect. I'm like, oh my God, that's crazy. I was really surprised at that. I'm like, oh, this is really nice. I like this. This is cool. And I'm thinking to myself, well, do I really need 32 or could I get 64? And then I'm like, no, I'm not going to get 64 because it's like a 6-week wait time to order a new computer. Mm. I'm not doing that. But in all honesty, the computer, just like from a performance perspective, is quite good. I like it. It's got my stamp of approval. I think it's pretty mind blowing.
Did you see the video Marquez Brownlee posted on Twitter? It's like a minute and a half of like him showing editing on the MacBook Pro.
I did not know. What can you summarize? Or
yeah, basically what he did is he had 8K footage from that's raw red.
Yep.
And he it's important to note this is not ProRes because ProRes will run smoother.
Yes.
Than other codecs. So it's not ProRes. It's Red Raw, and he just literally drags a new filter on top of the entire timeline.
Yeah.
And changes the filter, and then you can start the video again, and there's no delay, there's no pause, there's no break, there's nothing. There's nothing at all. It's just like all totally seamless. There isn't even a delay when you hit the spacebar to like play the video. Like it's almost as if it didn't have to process anything. And then the fans didn't kick on at all. It was dead silent the whole time. Like it's impressive. It is very impressive.
So like the work that the pro workflow team, that's like the team that they look at all the workflows that people have that are using their pro apps, and they obviously have to try and optimize for the workflow. On that new hardware. It's insane because their target market, or the target market, is people like Marquez who's shooting in 8K red files where They've been editing on Mac Pros for the past 2 years, and they're trying to figure out, how do I optimize this new portable piece of machinery, this portable computer, to function as or function like this big desktop that that people have had for 2 years. And the work that they've done is quite amazing, because obviously 8K footage is double the resolution of 4K footage, and red raw footage is much less digestible than ProRes, like you mentioned. So the work that they've done is pretty crazy, and it's I think it's a testament to just how serious Apple feels about the Mac with professionals. And that's just the internal part of it. Like, there's the experience part of it, which you're like, promotion, the display, all that is just top notch, to save a bad pun.
I was gonna try to get a notch pun in there so we can transition to the notch.
Yeah, which we can. We can talk about the notch.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
It's clear that the computers that came out last year were not aimed at professionals, but people bought them as stopgaps to their workflows, right? Because they had a computer that was X years old and it just wasn't cutting it, and they bought that. And so now they have to figure out what to do with this. For me, a no-brainer to sell my old computer and keep using this, because it is fast. Like, it really, really is a booster or an accelerant to my workflow.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though the M1 was still an improvement for you, this is the computer designed for what you use computers for. So it definitely makes more sense to have a MacBook Pro.
Totally. The one thing that, if I'm just looking at the computer by itself, I think the 16-inch is too big for me, but I don't want to take the 14-inch because of what I would be perceived as the kind of thermal limitations of it. I'm okay with using a 16-inch and just not liking the size of it. But it's a big computer. It's beefy, for sure. It's beefcake.
Yeah.
It's thick with 2 C's.
I feel like the design, from the pictures I've seen, the design feels very different than other Apple products that I've seen before. It has almost like a more industrial design. Do you feel that when it's in person with you, or does it still just have that reminiscent of old Apple design?
It feels completely different than the previous generation of MacBooks. Like, you have a 2015, I think, right?
I have a 2017.
Oh, 2017. Okay, so you have the previous generation. That is more like soft edges, rounded. And what I would equate it to is that 2016 and the 2017 and 2019 MacBook Pros had the same design inspiration, or seem to have the same design inspiration as the iPhone did and the iPad, where this shares the same design inspiration as the new iPhone and the new iPad. It's very industrial. It's very flat. When you look at it, they hide some of the edges in some kind of unique ways, but it's very industrial feeling to me, or I think industrial is the right way to kind of phrase it.
Yeah, I saw a top view of the prior model and the new model, and it even, like, just from a top view, it feels like the corners are rounded differently, and even the screen is rounded now, which I love. I love the rounded screen on the iPhone and the Apple Watch.
Yeah,
I don't have an iPad that has one, but I appreciate that rounded corner.
I mean, the edges, everything. I mean, it's if you look at your the design of the iPhone. I'm holding up my iPhone 13 to the camera. Like, it looks just like this. It's the rounded edges along the side and the flat edges and everywhere else. Where on the old generation MacBooks, they were kind of like, not waterfall, but they kind of like fell over, if that makes sense. But it's definitely it's not unwelcome. I think it's very cool looking. The one thing that maybe the second thing I don't like is where I get these marks on my wrist from, like, holding my wrist against the side of it.
Oh, really? Is it like sharper almost?
I'm touching it right now, rubbing my finger against it. I'm like, is it sharp?
I'm doing the same thing on mine. Mine feels pretty smooth, but I also have a computer that's a few years old now, so.
Yeah.
So it might have gotten worn down over the years.
like you have sandpaper on the inside of your wrists, and you're like, yes, sanding this down.
I just, like, go like this on my desk all the time and just, like, rub my wrists against it. Yeah. I
would say for me, it's definitely different than the MacBook Pro from last year feels, if that makes sense. Like the edges of it, and maybe because the edges are or the palm rest between where the computer starts and where the keyboard starts. I'm talking about that area is so big in comparison to the previous, or to the 13-inch MacBook Pro, where it's almost like I have to lay my whole wrist on top of it, where before I might have just got, like, the top of my hand because that area is much smaller. I don't have my 13-inch MacBook Pro here, Does that make sense? Like the actual surface area.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, actually, this is because I'm hearing you say that, and then I'm looking at my MacBook Pro, and there actually is a pretty big gap between the touch bar and where the display hinges. Is that reduced on the MacBook, the new one? Because my thought is maybe...
Yeah. It's about one digit from my pinky, from my nail to my first digit.
Did it get taller, maybe? Because the screen is a little bit bigger? But it's the same, like, size, roughly.
Yeah, so I saw a video... I think it was Max Tech that did it, where they did the measurements, and they basically took, each computer, your model and then this model, and they laid them, next to each other, and it looks like there's a little bit of visual difference, or looks like there's a little bit of difference. Then they put them on, back to back and then front to front, and there's really only a difference when you look at the bottom of it, where instead of being kind of rounded on the generation that you have, this is more squared off. But there's not a tremendous amount of difference. He didn't, but the one thing he didn't do is he didn't measure it to see the actual thickness of it.
I think the new one's thicker, at least.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't know that. It looks thicker. I don't have a 16-inch MacBook Pro to compare it against from the last generation. But I know it sure is quieter. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Sure is quiet. I haven't heard the fans go on, I think maybe at all. The other night I was sitting here, I'm like, are those the fans? I was like all like surprised. I'm like, oh no, that's my air conditioning. I'm like, no, that's not it. That's the air conditioning outside. I'm like, oh, I'm like listening to it like real like covertly. Like I put my ear next to it. I'm like, are those the fans going on? And I'm like, oh no, it's not. That's something else in the other room. Someone's like flushing the toilet on the other side of the house.
Compared to my 2017, where like I updated it last night, and it just like the fans were roaring because of the update. I'm like, really?
Really? Intel? Now I wonder if some of that is maybe like how would you call that? Like Apple like just shitting on Intel, saying, you know what? Anytime that we're going to do something now, Intel with your computers, we're just going to crank up the fans so everyone thinks that your computers are, or that your processors. The
spinny beach ball like comes back like twice as often.
Yeah, that's funny. That is funny. But Holden, when you think about like 20 or 25%, like it doesn't sound like a lot, but then you're like, oh my gosh, that just saved like minutes off of whatever I was doing. And it's not just like, I didn't watch the video that you're referring to with Marquez, but like it's not about, that you save 1 minute on one thing and that's really the end of your day. It's the fact that there are these like time savers on all these different tasks that you do throughout the day, and you're able to do more, right? Or do what you were doing in a short amount of time. Where it used to take me like 12 hours to edit a video, like not in like a contiguous block, but just 12 hours over the course of a few days. I was able to edit a video in like 4 hours. I'm like, oh my God, this is like, it was amazing to me because it was just so fast. I am impressed. I'm a fan, but not like a spinning fan like on your computer.
Which is now running on my computer. So how's the notch?
The notch to me is not a big deal. Like it's like when you start using your iPhone, you might notice it for the first few days, minutes maybe, but it's almost kind of like fades into the background. I don't necessarily think it's a big deal. What I think is that, and it's not, nothing about Face ID, but what I think is that if you had a smaller notch, it would look really strange. Like it would look like kind of unbalanced because the screen is so big, and something small wouldn't kind of like lay right or wouldn't have a good proportions. But I don't mind it. It doesn't necessarily, like some people really got upset around this, and I was like, why? What's the big deal? Like, I guess in my kind of estimation, if this is a consumer laptop, it's okay. Then I can maybe understand why you should be upset. But it's not really a consumer laptop. It's not aimed towards people who are sitting there checking email, and people who are really buying this to check email. This is not your machine. This is not what you should be buying. This is really built for someone who has a very kind of specific or intense workflow for doing something over and over and over again. And I don't mean like checking Excel. It's not a big deal to me. And I think probably even most people, like maybe not most, I'd say a portion of people who are using this computer will be using it maybe in clamshell mode with it in a, on a desk, like in a desktop setup. Not necessarily, again, on their couch checking email.
Yeah, from an aesthetic standpoint, I definitely agree that like it doesn't matter.
No,
like I was someone who, when the iPhone 10 was announced, I was screaming from the rooftops about how horrible the notch was. I can't believe Apple
Yeah.
did this, yada yada. I was one of those people. And then I got an iPhone XR the next year, and I don't even think about the notch. It's like not even a thing. The one legitimate thing I think is worth bringing up is for certain pro users who use certain apps that have a ton of menu bar items that are literally blocked by the notch. I do think that needs to get worked out, and I think it will. I'm honestly surprised it wasn't worked out already, to be totally frank. I don't think that's personally going to impact me. I don't use apps that have huge menu bars. Yep. But I think for those people, I can see that being very frustrating.
So just to make sure that I understand, the menu bar is on the top left-hand side, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then what's the one on the top right-hand side? Where is that the menu?
Status bar, I think.
Status bar, thank you. Yeah. Okay. So it does not, like right now I'm in full screen. I have Safari. Safari only has like 5 tabs. But what I thought happened was I thought your cursor was supposed to go around the notch. Like if you went right through it, it would not go through it. You know what I mean? It kind of be.
It does.
Mine goes directly through it. Maybe that's just the way that Safari is updated. Let me see. I have another app.
It was what's his name? Is it Snazzy Labs?
Yeah, Quinn.
Yeah. He posted a video where the menu bar extended to underneath the notch, and then he was able to like put his mouse under the notch and have like a menu show up, but he couldn't see what the menu option was because it was blocked by the notch or the menu label.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think that was DaVinci Resolve in his example. Like it's
yeah.
Like I don't know. Like I think that was just kind of not soapboxing, but like just complain. Like not saying that his complaint was not real, but I think it was kind of over exaggerated in the fact that like you're using an app that hasn't been updated. Mm-hmm. I guess, do you expect Mac OS to really account for every different kind of every variation of someone who has menu bar apps, or do they have to then update their app to account for you know what I mean? Like how do you expect the operating system to gracefully handle it? I would say that it's not gracefully handling it now, but it just seems like it's a little bit of a big complaint.
Yeah, and to be clear, I don't think this is like a huge issue that brings down the MacBook Pro or anything like that. Like I'm not speaking from a catastrophe standpoint.
Let's see here.
Let's hope this other one charged enough so that I can hear you.
Yeah.
1 second, sorry. We're sending this 1 year, so
no problem.
We should be good there. All right.
Yeah.
I'll start off from where I was. Okay, so I don't think that like the notch is like a huge massive deal. Like I don't think it's a detriment to the product overall by any means. I do think that one thing they could have done to make this a lot simpler would be to have it scroll horizontally on either side of the notch. So your status bar, if you have too many status bar items and they go off, you can scroll horizontally. If you have too many menu bar options, you can scroll horizontally. I think that would have been a good option because that is something I think should be handled by the operating system as opposed to individual developers.
Mm-hmm.
I think because I think it would be cleaner that way, but I don't think it's a huge issue. I'm surprised that happened at all.
So what I think you're referring to is like where the operating system would have some kind of behavior similar to Bartender, right? Where it kind of like hides the hides the menu bar items until you click on some kind of glyph or some kind of action that then which reveals them. Does that sound right?
No. So think of it as it's all scrolling. So like when you'll see file, edit, view, history, and then like bookmarks is a little cut off by the notch. But if you bring your mouse up to the menu bar and swipe to the left with 2 fingers, like you were scrolling on a Safari page or something like that, it would scroll and you would see the additional options that were missing. The same thing would work on the other side for the status bar if you have a lot of icons over there.
Okay.
And I feel like that probably wouldn't have been that hard to implement.
Yeah, you know what? There are a couple other interesting things which I think maybe just because of the way that like their org structure, like how things tend to be kind of tend to be opaque to other organizations who might not be working on it. Like I noticed that if I connect my new iPad Pro to it, it doesn't recognize it as a Thunderbolt device. However, when I connect that same iPad Pro to my Mac Mini, it recognizes it as a Thunderbolt device. So I think there are like this, how would I say this? I think that they kind of shelter people from, like getting visibility to the project so like that's why you see some things work where and other things don't. So the teams that are working on these individual components or these individual software pieces don't know that it was updated, and that's why it is like that way. In my example, where the team that's working on the iPad Pro didn't know about this device, that's why it doesn't integrate at this point. We'll see that later on in a future software update.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
All work out.
Yeah, it'll all work out.
Totally.
It's the same. I guess maybe the analogy I would use is, if you remember when the AirPods first came out, they only worked with your iPhone, and it took them like 2 software updates for them to work with your Mac or your iPad, because no one knew that the people that were working on the AirPods didn't know that, the teams that were working on these other products didn't know about the AirPods. It was kind of like done in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The main reason I wanted to just bring it up was that I feel like that complaint about the notch is more legitimate than any complaint about the notch on the iPhone.
Yeah, you're right, because you have items that live in your menu bar and in that the file menu bar. And I'm not saying it's not legitimate. I think it's just maybe the way it was positioned is a little bit overblown.
Yeah, no, like I said, I don't think this is like a catastrophe and like Apple's doomed or anything like that. I just thought it was worth mentioning.
No, it totally was. I watched the video and he's like, "Oh my God, how did they let this ship?" I'm like, you've never worked in a giant company. So once that happens, let me know. Really. Like, other than that, I mean, the size and weight, this is like 4.8 pounds. So it's definitely, it's definitely a thick boy, and surprisingly, it fits in my bags. Like, I thought that would actually be a problem. I thought it wasn't going to fit in the backpacks or the duffel bags. Duffel bags. I don't keep it in a duffel bag. The backpacks I use, but it actually does. I actually really like it a lot. The thermals, like how quiet it is, and we talked about the fans just a minute ago, but I am really surprised just how quiet it is. Like I think it can't go understated, especially if you upgraded from a 2016, 2017, 2019 MacBook, and you're like, holy cow, this thing is like night and day quiet. Like the very first thing you're like, is it even running? Like, is it on? Like, oh yeah, it is on. It is that quiet for sure. I just keep looking at the screen because the screen is so pretty. Now, with the screen, I do want to tell you that there are some applications, native applications, that don't run at the variable refresh rate. They're locked, or not locked, but I guess they're locked. They're locked at 60 hertz, and I think that
interesting.
Yeah, I think that goes to what you and I just talked about. So Safari is updated, right? Because Safari is it's like one of the things that people would use the most and then notice the most, right? But like there are other applications where it's still running at 60 frames per second, and again, it's about that that signing in of people who are working on the project, where you see this and it's not like there's no developer. I don't think there's developer documentation out for it yet either. Hold on one second. I'm gonna try and run.
Which apps have you noticed that in?
Hold on. So it runs smoothly, or at 120 hertz inside of Safari. It runs that way inside of podcasts. Let me just double check. Look at my list because I'm looking at the frames per second.
Podcast is an interesting one. I wouldn't have imagined that would have been a priority.
I think it's because it's a Catalyst app.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's the podcast app. Anything that's seemed to had been ported over to Catalyst or ported through Catalyst is running at that native refresh rate of 120 hertz. Maybe it's more about the libraries, and maybe that's why some of these apps have not been ported over yet. I honestly don't know.
Do the Pro apps support 120 hertz though? Like yes. Final Cut, Logic?
Yeah.
I'd imagine they'd have to. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, those do. I haven't tried. So I've used Logic, I've used Final Cut. I haven't used MainStage. I don't use MainStage at all, but I would suppose that is as well because that's a pro app. And Compressor, there's nothing to it.
Next time you perform live on a stage, you should try it out.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. Like right now, we use that. But I mean, honestly, it's really kind of. I think it's hard to overstate just how significant of an update these are in comparison to the previous generation. Like once, if you have an old MacBook and you go, pick this up and use it, it's kind of mind blowing just how fast it is. That's my opinion. I haven't finished with, running a majority of my, not majority, but I'd say I've finished running about half my test cases, like what I would normally do. It's a very good upgrade if you have the need for it. And I think that's the thing, right? Where I was reading reading tweets, be like, "Oh, dude, I bought the 64 gig, the max version of the max version, I guess, the max version of the M1 Max." And they're like, yeah. I'm thinking, what are you doing? I was like, oh, nothing. Mm-hmm. Like, don't buy the machine if you're just doing nothing. I mean, if you got money to burn, I can't tell you not to spend it, but it just seems kind of wasteful. And then plus you're making someone who might actually need the machine, right, wait for it.
And also too, like, let's say that you just want the larger screen, and that's like your only reason for wanting the 16-inch version. You just check email, but you want the larger screen. Why go for the Max? Why go for an increase in the RAM? Like, maybe storage, I can understand that. But like, you don't need any of the other improvements. Like, I probably don't need 32 gigs, but when I get one, I'm gonna get 32 gigs just because I want to future-proof it.
Yes.
But I know I'm not going to be utilizing 32 gigs like anytime soon.
Like right now, I'm running Ecamm. Let's see here, Ecamm Craft, which is a very lightweight app. It's just text and a couple other things, and it's doing the Photos library update, and I am at. Wait, where is it? I can't see it. Oh, sorry, memory. I'm using 11% of my memory.
Wow.
It's not very much at all. So sorry, I said that wrong. Let me rephrase that. I'm using both Ecamm, Craft, and a few other small apps, and I'm using. I have 13 gigs free of RAM. The RAM pressure is 11%. And the biggest thing that's using RAM right now is the photo library updates. That's almost 2.5.
When they say,
go ahead.
When they say there's 13 gigabytes of memory available, isn't there a portion of it that's not really being used? It's just kind of being prepped so that when it is needed, it can be loaded up instantly or something like that? I remember something about them talking about that in a keynote.
Yeah, so I mean, I've never understood that, how that works. Give me a second here. I'm just going to...
I think it was a Mac OS 11 feature.
Yeah.
It was a software feature that they introduced as like a performance boost. Maybe it was Mavericks? I don't remember at this point.
So this tells me that the pressure is 11%, app memory 17.42 gigs, wired 3.4 gigs, compressed like 100 megabytes, cache 9.87 gigabytes. Memory, if I could take a picture of this and send it to you, I will.
Maybe the cache is that reserve.
So I would assume that's reserved.
Because cache wouldn't be an app. Like, they would tell you what app is using up that memory, right?
Yeah, like if here, I'm gonna send it to you right now in iMessage.
Yeah.
Holden, and we'll be able to better talk about it since you'll have a picture of it in front of you. We'll just give it a minute. Do 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 do.
All right, I got it.
Cool.
Compressed free You have the 32 gig version?
Yes, 32 gig version.
Okay. What app is this you're using?
This is iStat Menu.
Okay. So I was expecting Activity Monitor. I'm like, did Activity Monitor change in Monterey?
No.
I was a little confused for a second. Yeah, I don't know what that's all about then. I don't know what the pressure is. That's what I'm confused about.
Mac OS pressure. Let's see here. OSX memory pressure. You can see the amount of system memory being used on your Mac in the Activity Monitor app in your Mac. Disk memory. Hold on. I noticed that the more I'm really far from my screen here, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to get better glasses. Let's see here. View the memory usage.
I've been having the same thought. I need to get a new prescription.
Yeah, you can see.
Do you wear contacts?
I do wear contacts. Yeah, I'm pretty blind.
I
was actually at the eye doctor yesterday, kind of coincidentally. But I'm like, I need to get better contact lenses. They need to come in. Okay, you can see the amount of system memory being used on your Mac. In Activity Monitor on your Mac, click memory on the touch bar. The touch bar. RIP touch bar.
No, I'm a little bummed about that still.
To see the following bottom of the window. Okay. So here, memory pressure graphically represents how efficiently your memory is serving your processing needs. Memory pressure is determined by the amount of free memory, swap rate, wired memory, and the cache memory. So to me, it sounds like that 11%. That means like that 90% of my 90% of my RAM is unused, or 89%.
I guess I don't know.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
Okay, memory used, the amount of RAM being used. To the right, you can see where the memory is allocated at memory. The amount of RAM being used by apps. Okay, at memory. Okay. Wired memory.
What confuses me about 11% is none of these numbers would add up to that. So, like, you have your active memory, which is 13.68 gigabytes, and your free memory, which is 13.96 gigabytes. That's not an 11% split. But even if you look at just the pressure side, it's like 17.4 gigabytes and 10 gigabytes. That's not an 11% split either, unless the wired is the 11%. I guess it had to be the wired is 11%. That would make sense. So maybe wired is what's currently being actively used. I don't know. I have no idea.
Well, if we look at it, right, because we look at the processes, 2.36 plus 1.80 plus 1.37 plus 1.21. That's more than 3.4 gigs of memory. But again, maybe not all those things are in memory. Let's see here.
But they could be. I mean, there's the space for it at least.
Yeah. So wired memory required by the system to operate. So it means there's currently 3.4 gigs of RAM that's needed by the system.
Gotcha.
This memory can't be cached and must stay in RAM, so it's not available for other apps. Compressed, which if you look at this image that I sent you, compressed shows that big red bar looks very big, but I guess it's actually this red bar here is active.
Yeah.
Compressed, the amount of RAM has been compressed to make more RAM available. Cache, the size of your files cached by the system until you unused memory. Let me just pull up Activity Monitor. Maybe that will maybe kind of answer all our questions.
Yeah, the wired part makes sense because like even I remember when the PlayStation came out, like the PS5 can't utilize all of the RAM for games because a portion of it has to be available for whatchamacallit, for operating system functions. So that would make sense. So maybe the 11% then is just like what is being utilized by the operating system, and the other 90% is free for use in third-party apps.
Yeah, I just sent you a different picture.
I'm not a hardware person, so this is very much over my head.
Yeah. So the other picture I just sent you, let me know when you get it.
Yeah, I got it.
So if you look at the bottom right-hand corner,
it only shows one thing in memory.
You know what? I had a filter on there. I was looking for some process that was running. I didn't know what it was. So it says physical memory.
Oh, I see UBC. Okay.
Yeah, I have 32 gigs of memory. Memory used 22. Cached files, 8.56. And what they say cached files are the size of the files cached by the system into unused memory to improve performance. Until this memory is overwritten, it remains cached so you can help improve performance when you reopen the app. Oh, okay. So
I think that's what I was referring to earlier with like the reserve.
Yep.
That's held to the side. That's what that is.
Yeah. So maybe, I mean, I guess if you had 64 gigs of memory, of unified memory, you would just have more things running in RAM. That seems like it would be, right? Like that's the, that seems like the gist of it. Control center.
It would make sense because things would be more instantly accessible if they're in RAM. So that would make sense.
Like right now,
definitely make the computer feel snappier.
Yeah. If I close messages there.
Well,
like
snappier depending on how much you're doing.
Yeah. So the process that's running right now, which has taken about the most amount of memory, is Blast Store service, which is the one of the messaging components, and then the Windows server, which is tiling of the windows. They're both using about 2.31 and 2.4 gigs of service, or gigs of RAM, gigs of RAM. So, yeah, I mean, maybe just to kind of summarize that section, because we just took like 7 minutes to talk about that. Yeah, so 32 gigs of RAM is very, at least seems to be very efficient. I don't see, like I was thinking about getting the 64 gig, but I'm like, even though it was not that much of a monetary, I mean, it's $400. It is a lot of money, but when you're buying a computer to have 4 or 5 years, it's not necessarily a lot of money in the grander context.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, you know what? Maybe I should have. Like, you know what? I probably will not use this, and if I try and use this, I'm gonna. If I get this 64 gigs of RAM, I'm just gonna look for other ways to stress my machine where I'd be then, oh my god, why did I get this? You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like I'm then looking for trouble in that respect, because I only have 16 gigs of RAM on my M1 MacBook Pro or my M1 Mac Mini, and that's served me well. Plus, the RAM is much, much faster now. So that's the good thing. It's like double the bandwidth of the M1. And it certainly shows because it's zippy. Zippy long stocking. Might be a show title. Zippy long stocking. Yeah, so it's quite impressive, Holden. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'll be honest with you. It's a very funny statement because it implies that I'm not honest with you sometimes.
Don't be honest with me, actually. Just lie.
Just lie. You know what? I could take it. Just lie. So Holden, it is impressive. I think that if you were thinking about, someone out there who's thinking about getting this computer and they're like, I don't know, is it going to be that much quicker? The answer is yes. It totally is going to be that much quicker, and it's significantly better than It's significantly better than the M1 MacBook from last year, and it's leaps and bounds better if you have an older Mac. It's night and day. I guess the caveat I would say there is that you want to make sure that your apps run on it first before going to get it if you have an older Mac, because that's the thing where still kind of strangely some apps are not supporting M1 or Apple Silicon a year later still, which is frustrating. What
would you say the benefit is, though, if the Rosetta apps perform comparably?
I think it's just the fact that you don't want to support, maybe not support, where you, as a developer, you'd want to be able to take advantage of frameworks that are running on the hardware itself, not necessarily have to worry about adapted frameworks. So you might be able to eke out more performance from your app and do different things with it as a developer and give your consumers or the people that use that app more services or better performance or whatever the case is if it was running natively on that machine.
Gotcha. Okay.
So does that make sense?
It does, yeah, because I'm realizing the comparable performance is comparable to prior generations of Macs,
yeah,
but it's still held back because it could reach a higher potential with the native chips.
Exactly. It's like, drinking coffee in the morning, right? You could have you drink decaf. it's you're still drinking coffee, but it's just not really the same thing. Or you could drink real coffee or espresso.
The M1 chips, the caffeine of Apple products.
Yes, the high octane caffeine, or the energy drinks of the caffeine world. Maybe that's a way of saying it.
And the M1 Max is the triple espresso shot version.
Yes, that is totally true. I'm pretty happy. Did your friend who was looking for one, did they end up getting one? You had a friend in Chicago?
He did not know.
He did not know. Yeah, unfortunately now, like if you go to look at one, or if you want to buy one, it's like 5 weeks or 6 weeks. It's like, ugh. It's like 5 to 6 weeks. That's the time frame they give you. Because I do have a little bit of storage anxiety. I'm like, oh my gosh, I only have 1 terabyte. I'm like, I need to get more storage. 1 terabyte's too small. And it's, for context, like my Final Cut projects, or my Final Cut libraries, are somewhere between like 300 gigabytes and maybe 500 gigabytes. So if I put that on my computer, I'm like eating half of my storage on my 1 terabyte version. So I have this kind of like anxiety, like I don't want to do that. Like it's me being stupid about this.
No, I totally get it.
Yeah.
One of the biggest mistakes I made in buying my MacBook Pro was I decided I don't need more than 256 gigs of storage because the cloud will save me, and what a load that is. Yeah, I want to get 2 terabytes next time, so I just don't even have to think about it.
Yeah. Because the mental bandwidth of having to manage your computer, like I didn't install, so I got the 1 terabyte version, and I didn't install several apps that I normally would use. Like I didn't install any of the Adobe apps because I'm like, oh, these things are, they're kind of beefy. They have a big footprint when you install them. They're like 4 gigs. And I'm like, oh, I'll just use it on my other machine. But I'm like, I'm going to sell my machine. What am I going to do there? I'm going to have to use it eventually. So I'm like, oh man. So after I installed all my apps, I got down from 1 terabyte to 900 gigs of storage. And then I put my project on there that I was editing yesterday, and that took me from 900 to, I think it was just like 540 maybe, 540 gigs. I'm like, ooh. I'm like, do I put this on an external drive? What do I do? I'm like, why would I buy an external drive? Like I'm right now in like the sweet period or the honeymoon period of I could return this thing and just get a bigger one. Right? Like that doesn't make sense for me to go spend a few $100s on an external drive when I can just literally order another one. So
I think that's worth the 6-week wait versus the additional RAM.
Oh yeah, I think so too. Now you're gonna talk me into it, damn it.
Hey, the storage is a big deal, and you are working with some big files, so I totally support this decision.
Thank you.
I'll put it this way. I'm talking about getting a 2 terabyte for myself. I don't do near the large file work that you do on your computer. So if I'm thinking like, oh, I think 2 terabytes might be good for me, it's definitely you need to go 2 terabytes.
Oh my God, Holden.
Sorry, I'm just
such a bad influence.
Just saying how I feel.
Just saying how I feel. Let's see here. So yeah, I'm pleasantly I'll say pleasantly plump. I'm pleasantly happy or surprised with the performance. It's a good thing. It is a good thing. I'm looking at the pricing right now. So 2 terabytes, December 14th through the 21st. 4 terabytes, December 14th through 21st. 8 terabytes. Oh my God, that's so expensive. 8 terabytes, $5,699. That is someone's car. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Anyway, I don't know if you know this, but you can now buy AppleCare and pay for it yearly. Like where before, so they made a whole bunch of structural changes to AppleCare pricing, AppleCare Plus pricing specifically for this. So you can pay for, I think, 2 years up front, or maybe it might be 3 years. Let's see here. I don't want to misquote.
3 years on a MacBook. Any Mac is 3 years, yeah.
Or you can pay for it year by year, and it's like a subscription. Yep, AppleCare for the Mac.
That's much better than month by month.
Yeah, so here annual annual coverage $149 a year, or 3 years for $399. The difference is that when you do the $149, it is until canceled. It's not 3 years.
Yeah.
So you can actually keep it. I mean, you could keep it in 4 years. You would pay more, but obviously you have the benefit of having AppleCare Plus for 4 years.
Yeah, you'll end up spending more money in the 3 year time frame, but for the option to go extra years, that's a big deal. That's a really
Yeah.
big deal. And I've never liked the monthly options. I like buying subscriptions annually.
Yeah. I think the only time I'm trying to think when I don't do that. I think the only time I don't do that is when there is it when so I like to resell my products, and when I resell them, I like to transfer the subscription to the new person. That's kind of like the incentive I give them if you want to buy my phone, whatever the case is. But there's sometimes I don't buy I don't buy the. Oh, I know what it is. So when I trade I do a lease program from the phone, I never buy the Apple Care up front, because I know after a year I'm going to trade it into them, and they're not going to give me anything for that Apple Care cancellation, right? Like I can't transfer it to the phone company; they don't care. There's no benefit there. Oh my God, $5,600! That's so expensive.
That's like double the cost of. I mean, how much is the full maxed out Pro cost? Like, what percentage of the price of that computer is going to be just the hard drive? I'm curious.
So if you go to 8 terabytes, it is $1,800. No, sorry, $2,200
for a MacBook Pro 16-inch.
Yeah. Yep. So
wow,
32 gigs with 8 terabytes of storage is $6,099.
I'm going to check this out right now.
I know, it's unbelievable.
I have a polishing cloth in my cart. I didn't remember I did that.
Did you wait? Did you
just
get
to see the shipping time?
Oh yeah.
No, just to see the shipping time. My dad got one.
Did he?
But I didn't.
What did he say?
So we were talking about it, and he's like, I don't know, like,
ever.
Should I get it? Should I not get it? And I'm like, Dad, if you don't order this now, and then the ship times go to like 12 weeks, you're gonna be kicking yourself. Just spend the $20 and return it if you don't like it later on.
Yeah.
And that's what he's doing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always better just to order it, and if you don't like it, they return it.
If it's $20, I think that's much more reasonable to do. I'm just checking out this price rate. Oh, $5,600 with the okay. With the hard drive.
Yes, for the 32 gig, correct. If you go to the 64 gig, it is $6,099.
Yeah, I thought you were saying it was that was the price for just the hard drive, which I mean, wouldn't have surprised me with solid state drives and how expensive they can get. No, it's still like $2,200 for the 8 terabyte SSD.
Yeah,
that's bananas.
That is bananas, and they're not like it's not like a single. It's not like a single 8 terabyte chip. It's not even like 2 4 terabyte chips. It's like several 512 or several 765. What's the number? The next integer up from 512, and they're all like kind of soldered together on the board. Say that again. 768.
1024, then 2048.
Oh yeah. So yeah, they're all like smaller. They're all smaller chips, and they're just kind of being strung together through the storage controller. Mm-hmm. Crazy. It's a lot of money. But yeah,
the 8 terabytes. I think you need to go for it, Michael. I really think you need to get the 8 terabyte.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's a negative Ghost Rider. That is a negative. From your perspective, what do you think about the 14 versus 16? If you Holden Pardo, what would you buy?
I'm really caught on this right now. If I'm just looking at the MacBook Pro, at least, because I have other things I'm looking at too, I go back and forth because I have a 15-inch right now.
Yeah.
I like that size. I'm used to the size. I don't think going down to 14-inch would be a big difference in screen real estate. I don't think it'd be that meaningful.
Yeah, so your MacBook Pro, is it 15.2 or 15 point something? Like is it bigger than 15 or is it just 15? Do you know?
I think it's like 15.2 or something like that.
Okay, so this is.
But I have the one before they went to 16 inches.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
So it's just this. If you were to go to the 14-inch, it would be 1 inch smaller, which is basically a half inch on either side.
Yeah. So I mean, it would be smaller for sure, but I think it'd be manageable.
Yeah. I
don't think it would bother me at all. I think then in 16 I get a little bit extra screen real estate, but then I also get better battery life. I'm not as worried about the thermals. The one thing though that really is pulling me towards the 16-inch is the fast charging through MagSafe is only available on the 16-inch model.
Is it only available or it only comes with it? Oh, you're right. It's only available. Yeah, that's right.
which is strange to me, but that is, it is what it is, and I want that feature because that's really nice. It's really, really handy.
Yeah, it is really nice. I guess depending on how you're using it, right? Like, like if you're connecting it to an external monitor, like through HDMI, or you're connecting it through a Thunderbolt monitor, you might not necessarily use that feature very often because it's always being charged by the external display. But I totally get it, right? Being able to 50% charge something in 30 minutes is like amazing, and it's quite cool because you're like blink, and it's like, oh, it's there. Like you get this like rush of, like just like energy coming through the MagSafe connection. It's like, wow, I like it. I
know this isn't.
Go ahead.
I know you didn't ask this question in particular, but my big hold off right now is, one, I want to finish school. I'll get a computer after I finish school. But my big hold off is I want to wait to see what if whatever this 30 or bigger iMac is, that'll have the M1 Pro in it.
iMac.
Excuse me.
Okay.
I'm still like waiting out to see that and kind of weigh up my options from there. I'll probably still go for a laptop though, I think.
Yeah, I mean, in the past 18 months, like I don't think I've used my computer like outside of the house, like that wasn't like at my family's house. Like I wasn't like on a location shoot, or I wasn't at my office, and that's really why I went to a laptop. After I graduated school, I was like, I'm never going to need a laptop. I can do everything on my iPad. And that's kind of like the dilemma that people find themselves in after they graduate, or after they stop doing, schoolwork, where you're like, oh, I don't necessarily have to keep using a computer. I can kind of downsize, so to speak, and use, a tablet. But for someone like you, if you work in game development, you're always going to be on a computer, whether you're at work or maybe when you're at home. So you probably would benefit from having a desktop, especially something that's going to be more powerful than a MacBook or a Mac Mini.
Yeah, and that's definitely one way I'm thinking about it. The other way I'm thinking about it is like physical spaces. I like to kind of treat different physical spaces for like one thing. Like my desk is for like working on stuff.
Yeah.
Not Netflix, not gaming. Like I don't do that in my office because when I get down here, I want to be in that mindset. And a laptop kind of allows for that, where I can use my Mac for more things. And then when I want to be in work mode, I go to my office. When I want to be in, I'm just going to be browsing the web kind of thing, I'll go up and I have a little nook area, and I'll kind of hang out in the chair over there. And like a laptop will let me do that. But I can do that stuff on an iPad. Like you were just kind of saying, like that stuff can all be done on an iPad, the fun stuff.
See, and that's how Apple gets people like you and me. I'm the same exact way. Like I have like everything is purpose built. Like I have like a certain pair of AirPods I wear for the gym, and a certain pair of AirPods I might wear to go to sleep, or whatever the case is, let's just say, right? And then you're like, well, now I need to have a different computer for this and a different computer for that. And you're like, dude, I can't have all these computers, or I can't have all these things. But I totally get what you're saying, right? It's like, when things are purpose built, you kind of have it. You usually have a better experience with them because you're buying them around kind of a certain context or a certain set of activities. I agree with you. I don't like to take my computer out of the room or out of where I'm at right now and do things with it, though sometimes I have to because I just can't sit in here all day. That's just not me. But I don't know, Holden. I think the iMac Pro, or whatever it's going to be called, whenever it comes out, like the aspect of conformability, like being able to take your laptop, is much more appreciable when it's like before you used to have a desktop because you could only get that computing power in the desktop context, right? Like you could only get that when you had, something that was, permanently plugged into the wall. You couldn't get that type of performance when you had a laptop. A laptop was kind of like a trade-off in that regard. Mm-hmm. But now you're getting desktop-like performance in this notebook with like very little trade-offs, and you're like, oh well, do I even really need these? And I think we might see like more advancements in like some kind of like maybe not docking to say generally, but like in like these computers that are that they're like they can be used in many different contexts, and like maybe you could take this computer and plug it into a external GPU and a display, and then you get like the same type of performance as you would get with that iMac. So it's much more I can't think of the word. It starts with the C right now. It's on the tip of my tongue. I'm getting very old. It's much more, it's like components, right? Like you could take all these components and build something opposed to, buying one thing for only this context. God, what is that word now? It's going to escape me. It's going to drive me nuts.
Yeah, I don't know what it is either. But I know what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, that would actually be like the next, like probably like the next evolution of computing, like where you can take all these different things. It's kind of like Transformers, like, or like Voltron, where you take like all these individual cars and you build them up and you got this big kick-ass Voltron who's able to do much more cooler things when they're all together, opposed to like that, opposed to like these like individual cars. In my opinion, at least at this point in my life, the advantage is where you could take this and kind of go to different contexts, and you're getting this insane amount of computing on your lap for what would have been a desktop computer, a year ago. Like this computer is outperforming the Mac Pro in almost half of the tests that people are doing with them, which is crazy.
Yeah, really knocked it out of the park.
They really knocked it out of the park. They not really knocked out of Apple Park. So, I don't know. You want to talk about anything else with the Mac Pro or with the MacBook Pro?
No, I think it might be the longest we've ever talked about a single subject on the podcast.
I know. I think so too.
But this is an important device. It's a big deal.
Yeah. Holden, where can everyone find you at?
I am on Twitter at Holden DePardo.
Awesome. Holden, thank you very much for joining me this evening. Talk about the new 2021 MacBook Pro, Max, whatever it's called now. Holden, you have a good evening.
You too. Thanks for having me again, Michael.
Thanks.